The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Victoria Brennan as she tumbled down the rocky ravine, her horse's terrified scream still echoing in her ears before everything went silent, except for the sound of her own ragged breathing and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Pain shot through her left leg like white-hot fire, and when she tried to move, the world spun violently. Blood soaked through her riding skirt from a gash on her thigh, and her canteen lay somewhere above on the trail, impossibly out of reach. The September heat of 1883 was unforgiving in the Arizona Territory, and Victoria knew with a sinking certainty that she might not survive the day. She had been traveling from Flagstaff to Williams, Arizona, carrying documents for her father's mining company when her mare had spooked at a rattlesnake. The fall had been brutal, and now she lay wedged between two boulders at the bottom of a ravine that nobody would think to search. Her father would not expect her back for another 2 days, and the trail she had taken was one less traveled, chosen foolishly because she had wanted to see the desert wildflowers that bloomed after the late summer rains. Victoria pressed her hand against the wound on her leg, trying to stop the bleeding. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She was 22 years old, educated in San Francisco, and had always prided herself on being practical and capable. But lying here, broken and bleeding, she felt every bit the fool her father's business partners had always claimed women to be. They had said she had no place in the mining business, that her ideas about worker safety and fair wages were naive fantasies. Now she would die before she could prove them wrong. The sun continued its slow arc across the sky, and Victoria's thoughts drifted between consciousness and delirium. She thought of her mother, who had died when Victoria was 15, leaving her to manage their household while her father threw himself into his work. She thought of all the things she had wanted to do, the changes she had hoped to make, the life she had imagined. It seemed impossibly cruel that it should end here, alone among the rocks and dust. Time passed in strange increments. Minutes felt like hours. The pain in her leg had evolved from sharp agony to a dull, throbbing ache that somehow felt worse, because she knew it meant she was losing too much blood. Her lips were cracked and dry, and the afternoon heat was intensifying. She tried calling for help once, but her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, swallowed immediately by the vast emptiness of the desert. Then she heard it, a sound that at first she thought must be a hallucination, hoofbeats, slow and steady, coming from somewhere above. Victoria tried to call out again, but her throat was too dry. She looked around desperately and found a rock small enough to lift. With the last of her strength, she hurled it against the boulder beside her. The crack echoed through the ravine. The hoofbeats stopped, silence stretched out, and Victoria's heart sank. But then a voice called down, deep and concerned. "Hello? Someone down there?" "Help!" Victoria managed, her voice cracking. "Please, I'm hurt." Within moments, a figure appeared at the rim of the ravine, backlit by the sun so she could not make out his features. "Hold on!" the voice called down. "I'm coming to get you." She watched as he disappeared from view, then reappeared climbing down the rocky slope with the confidence of someone who had spent his life navigating difficult terrain. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn denim and a dusty brown vest, with a hat pulled low over his face. As he got closer, Victoria could see sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of the sky at twilight, somewhere between blue and gray. "My God," he said when he reached her, immediately kneeling beside her and taking in her injuries with a practiced eye. "How long have you been down here?" "Since morning," Victoria whispered. "My horse, she threw me." He was already pulling a canteen from his belt. "Easy now," he said, supporting her head gently as he brought the water to her lips. "Slow sips, that is it." The water was the most glorious thing Victoria had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but he controlled the flow, letting her drink just enough before pulling it away. "More in a minute," he promised. "First, let me look at this leg." His hands were gentle but efficient as he examined her wound. Up close, Victoria could see he was probably in his late 20s, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. There was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel safer than she had any right to feel, given the circumstances. "It is deep but clean," he said. "Lucky thing that rock did not hit an artery. What is your name?" "Victoria Brennan," she managed. "Preston Walker," he replied, already pulling bandaging material from his saddlebag, which he must have brought down with him. I'm going to bind this tight, Victoria. It is going to hurt. She nodded, bracing herself. True to his word, the pain was intense as he cleaned the wound with whiskey from a flask and then wrapped it tightly. Victoria bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, but she did not cry out. When he finished, Preston offered her another drink of water, followed by a small sip of the whiskey. "For the pain," he said with a slight smile that transformed his serious face into something warmer. "Though you are tougher than most men I know." Hardly made a sound. "My father always said complaining does not fix problems," Victoria said, her voice stronger now. "Your father sounds like a practical man." Preston was studying the ravine walls, clearly calculating the best way to get her out. "Can you move your arms? Any pain in your back or neck?" Victoria carefully tested her movements. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken except possibly her leg. "I think I am all right besides the leg." "That leg is going to make this interesting," Preston said. "I cannot carry you up that slope. Too steep and too much loose rock. I'm going to have to rig a rope system. My horse, Duke, he is strong enough to help pull you up if I guide you." "You carry rope?" Victoria asked, surprised. "Always," Preston replied. "I work as a ranch hand and scout. Never know when you will need to pull a steer out of a wash or fix a broken wagon. Lucky for you, I was taking a shortcut to Williams to meet my brother." Williams. That was where Victoria had been heading. "I was traveling to Williams as well," she said, "carrying documents for my father's mining company." Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. "Not many women travel alone out here, especially not with important documents." There was no judgment in his voice, just observation, but Victoria felt the need to explain. "My father trusts me. I have made this journey before, though usually I take the main road. Today I wanted to see the wildflowers after the rain." "Those flowers almost cost you your life," Preston said, but his tone was gentle. "Wait here. I'm going to set up the rope system." He climbed back up the ravine with impressive agility, and Victoria watched him work from below. He moved with the economy of motion that came from years of hard physical labor, and she found herself grateful beyond words that he had happened along this remote trail. The odds of anyone finding her had been so slim. The fact that Preston had not only found her, but clearly knew what he was doing, felt like a miracle. It took him nearly half an hour to rig everything to his satisfaction. He secured ropes around the larger boulders at the top, then climbed back down with a harness fashioned from more rope. "This is going to be uncomfortable," he warned, "but it is the safest way. I'm going to secure this around you, under your arms and around your waist. Then Duke and I will pull you up slowly while I climb beside you to make sure you do not hit the rocks too hard. Keep your injured leg as still as you can." Victoria nodded, and Preston carefully fitted the harness around her. His hands were impersonal, but kind, and he checked twice to make sure everything was secure before giving her another drink of water. "Ready?" he asked, looking into her eyes. "Ready," Victoria confirmed, though her heart was pounding with fear and pain. The ascent was every bit as uncomfortable as Preston had warned. Despite his best efforts to guide her, Victoria's injured leg bumped against rocks, sending fresh waves of agony through her body. She gritted her teeth and focused on breathing, on the blue sky above, on anything but the pain. Preston climbed beside her, one hand steadying her, the other gripping the rope, his voice calm and encouraging. "Almost there, Victoria. You're doing great. Just a little more. That is it." When they finally reached the top, Victoria lay on solid ground, gasping and dizzy with pain. Preston quickly released her from the harness and gave her more water. "The worst is over," he said. "Now we just need to get you to Williams. There is a doctor there, Doc Henley. Good man. He will fix you up properly." Victoria looked around and saw Preston's horse, a magnificent bay gelding, watching them with calm, intelligent eyes. "I cannot ride," she said, stating the obvious. "I know. You will ride with me. I will hold you steady." Preston was already rolling up his rope and securing his gear. "Williams is only about 5 miles from here. We can make it before dark if we leave now." He lifted her as carefully as possible, and even though he was gentle, Victoria could not suppress a gasp of pain. "I'm sorry," Preston murmured. "I know it hurts." He mounted Duke first, then had Victoria positioned in front of him, her back against his chest, his arms securely around her as he held the reins. It was improper, being held so intimately by a man she had just met, but propriety seemed absurd given the circumstances. Besides, there was nothing inappropriate in the way Preston held her. His grip was firm and protective, nothing more. "Tell me if you need me to stop," he said, his voice close to her ear. "We will go slow." The ride to Williams was a blur of pain and heat, but Victoria remained aware of Preston's steady presence behind her. He talked to her occasionally, asking her questions to keep her conscious, telling her about the landscape they were passing through. He had a pleasant voice, educated despite his rough appearance, and she learned that he had grown up in Texas, that he had been in Arizona for 3 years, that he loved the open country despite its harshness. "What about you?" he asked at one point. "What does a mining company owner's daughter do with her time when she's not delivering documents?" "I help run the company," Victoria said, her words slightly slurred from pain and exhaustion. "My father, he had a heart episode last year. He cannot handle all the work anymore, so I manage the accounts, deal with suppliers, check on worker conditions." "Worker conditions?" Preston sounded intrigued. "That's not usually something owners worry about." "They should," Victoria said firmly, some of her natural passion breaking through the pain. "Men work in dangerous conditions for too little pay. It is wrong. A successful business should take care of its workers, not exploit them." "That's a rare philosophy," Preston said, and she could hear the approval in his voice. "Most owners just want to extract as much profit as possible." "Most owners are short-sighted fools," Victoria replied, then immediately worried she had been too bold. But Preston just chuckled, a warm sound that she felt rumble through his chest against her back. "I like you, Victoria Brennan," he said simply. "You have fire in you. That is good. You're going to need it to heal from this." By the time they reached Williams, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Williams was a small but bustling town that had grown up around the railroad and logging industries. Preston rode straight to the doctor's office, a small building on the main street, and called out before he even dismounted. "Doc Henley, need you out here." An older man with a gray beard emerged, took one look at Victoria's pale face and blood-soaked skirt, and immediately sprung into action. "Bring her inside. What happened?" "Horse threw her into a ravine," Preston explained, carefully lifting Victoria down. Her leg screamed in protest, and this time she did cry out. "Been there since morning. Lost a fair amount of blood." Doc Henley had Preston carry her into an examination room and lay her on the table. "You did good work on that bandage," the doctor said, examining Preston's field dressing. "Probably saved her life, keeping the bleeding controlled like that. You have medical training?" "Learned from an army surgeon," Preston replied. "Picked up a few things during my time in the cavalry." Victoria listened to them talk as Doc Henley began working on her leg properly, cleaning the wound more thoroughly and stitching it closed. He gave her something bitter to drink first that made everything fuzzy around the edges, but she could still hear voices, still feel Preston's presence in the room. "She is lucky you found her," Doc Henley said. "Another few hours in that heat with this blood loss, she would not have made it." "I know," Preston replied quietly. "You know her family? Someone we should notify?" "Her father owns a mining company. Brennan," she said. "That ring any bells?" "Brennan Mining? Sure, I know of them. Good reputation, unlike some of the operations around here. Office is in Flagstaff, I think. We can send a telegram first thing in the morning." "I will take care of it," Preston said. Victoria wanted to thank him, wanted to say so many things, but the medicine was pulling her under, and she surrendered to the darkness. When she woke, it was fully night. She was in a small, clean room, tucked into a proper bed with crisp sheets. A lamp burned low on a bedside table, and Preston Walker sat in a chair beside the bed, his hat on his knee, his head tipped back against the wall. He appeared to be asleep, but when Victoria stirred, his eyes opened immediately. "Hey," he said softly, sitting forward. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell down a ravine," Victoria said, her voice hoarse, but she managed a small smile to show she was joking. Preston's face relaxed into an answering smile. "That's good. Doc Henley said if you woke up making jokes, you would be fine. You've been asleep for about 3 hours. He stitched you up properly, said you will have a nasty scar, but should heal up well if you keep it clean and stay off it for a few weeks." "A few weeks?" Victoria tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through her leg. "Easy," Preston said, standing to help adjust her pillows so she could sit more comfortably. Doc's orders. You need to let that heal properly or risk permanent damage. He said you might have a hairline fracture in the bone as well. Nothing he can do about that except recommend rest. Victoria looked around the room. Where am I? Doc Henley keeps a couple of rooms for patients who need overnight care. You will stay here until we can get word to your father. I sent a telegram to Flagstaff already, to the Brennan mining office. Figured someone there would know how to reach him. Thank you, Victoria said, truly looking at Preston for the first time since he had found her. In the lamplight, she could see his face more clearly. He had strong, honest features, and those unusual twilight-colored eyes held a depth of character that intrigued her. You saved my life. Just happened to be in the right place, Preston said, looking almost embarrassed by her gratitude. No, Victoria insisted. You could have just sent for help, but you climbed down yourself. You knew exactly what to do. You stayed with me, got me here safely, and you are still here now. That is more than just being in the right place. So thank you, Preston Walker. He met her eyes, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond forged in crisis. You are welcome, Victoria Brennan. Now you need to rest. Doc Henley will want to check on you in the morning. Are you leaving? Victoria asked, and she heard the hint of fear in her own voice. Just going to get some food and find a place to sleep, Preston said gently. I will be back first thing in the morning. Promise. He kept his word. When Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the window, Preston was back in the chair beside her bed, looking fresher and clean-shaven. He had brought wildflowers in a tin cup, the same desert blooms she had been seeking when disaster struck. Figured you should get to see them, he said with a shy smile, since you went to all that trouble. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtful gesture. They are beautiful. Doc Henley came in shortly after, examined her leg and declared himself satisfied with her progress. You will need to stay put for at least a week before you can even think about traveling, he told her, and even then, you will need to be in a wagon, not on horseback. That leg needs time. A week? Victoria's mind immediately went to all her responsibilities, the documents she had been carrying, the meetings her father expected her to attend. At minimum, Doc Henley said firmly. Young lady, you nearly died yesterday. Your body needs time to recover. Push it too soon and you could end up crippled or worse. Preston had been standing by the door, but now he spoke up. The documents you were carrying, where are they? In my saddlebag, if my horse did not run off too far. I will go back and look for your horse and bags, Preston said. If I find the documents, I can take them to whoever was expecting them. Save you the worry. You would do that? Victoria asked. Already planning to. Your father's telegram response came this morning. He is traveling down from Flagstaff, should be here tomorrow afternoon. But he was worried about some contract that needed to be delivered to the lumber mill owner here in Williams. I can handle that for you. I do not know how to repay you, Victoria said helplessly. No need for repayment. Just get better. Preston settled his hat on his head. I will be back later. You rest. True to his word, Preston returned that afternoon with her saddlebags, her canteen, and even her hat. Her horse, he reported, had wandered back toward the main trail and been found by a rancher who was boarding her in Williams until Victoria was ready to travel. Preston had already delivered the documents to the lumber mill owner, who sent his wishes for her speedy recovery. Over the next few days, a pattern developed. Preston would arrive in the morning, often with small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, a newspaper from Flagstaff, more flowers. He would sit with her, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Victoria learned that Preston had served in the cavalry for 4 years, that he had seen action against raiding parties and had learned to respect the native peoples even as he fought them. He had left the military 2 years ago, weary of the violence and the politics, and had been working as a ranch hand and occasional scout ever since. No desire to settle down? Victoria asked one afternoon. Own your own land? Preston gazed out the window at the town beyond. Always figured I would someday. Just have not found the right place yet, or the right reason. What would be the right reason? Victoria asked, genuinely curious. He turned back to her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I suppose when I find something, or someone, worth staying in one place for. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibility. Victoria found herself very aware of how she must look, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a borrowed nightgown, confined to bed. Not exactly how she wanted to appear to a man who made her heart race with just a look. Before she could respond, Doc Henley knocked and entered, breaking the moment. But Victoria could not stop thinking about what Preston had said, about what he might have meant. Her father arrived the next day in a flurry of worry and relief. Thomas Brennan was a sturdy man in his mid-50s, with silver-threaded dark hair and Victoria's same determined chin. He swept into her room, gathered her carefully into his arms, and she saw tears in his eyes. "My girl," he said gruffly, "I nearly lost you." "I'm all right, Father," Victoria assured him, "thanks to Preston Walker." Her father turned to Preston, who had stood respectfully when Thomas entered. "You are the man who saved my daughter?" "I am the one who found her, sir," Preston said, extending his hand. "Preston Walker." Thomas shook his hand firmly, then pulled the younger man into a brief, hard embrace. "You have my eternal gratitude. Doc Henley told me what you did, how you climbed down to get her, how you got her here safely. If there is anything I can do to repay you, anything at all, you name it." "No payment necessary, sir," Preston said. "I'm just glad I was there. Nevertheless, I am in your debt." Thomas turned back to Victoria. "The question now is how to get you home safely. Doc Henley says you cannot ride for at least another 2 weeks." "I have been thinking about that," Preston said. "If you would permit me, I could stay on in Williams, make sure Victoria is recovering properly, and then escort her back to Flagstaff when Doc Henley gives the all-clear. I know you probably need to get back to your business, sir." Thomas studied Preston with sharp, assessing eyes. Victoria knew her father was evaluating not just Preston's words, but his character. Finally, Thomas nodded. "That is generous of you, and truthfully, I do need to get back. We have a situation at one of the mines that requires my attention, but I would not leave Victoria in the care of a stranger." "I understand, sir." "However," Thomas continued, "you are not a stranger anymore. You saved my daughter's life, and Doc Henley speaks highly of you. More importantly, Victoria seems comfortable with you, and I trust her judgment. If you are willing to stay and see her safely home, I would be grateful and would insist on compensating you for your time." "I am happy to help," Preston said, "but I do not need compensation." "How about a job, then?" Thomas proposed. "We need good men at the mining company, men with integrity. From what Victoria tells me, you have experience with security work from your cavalry days. We could use someone overseeing safety and security at our operations." Preston looked surprised. "That is a generous offer, sir." "It is a practical one. Think about it while you are looking after my daughter." Thomas turned back to Victoria. "I hate to leave you, but truly, this mine situation cannot wait. The foreman sent word that we have a potential collapse situation. Men's lives could be at stake." "Go," Victoria urged. "I will be fine. Preston has taken good care of me." Her father stayed for another few hours, discussing business matters with Victoria and getting to know Preston better. By the time he left, Victoria could tell that Thomas approved of the cowboy, which meant a great deal to her. Her father was an excellent judge of character. After Thomas departed, Preston and Victoria fell back into their comfortable routine. As the days passed and Victoria healed, she found herself looking forward to Preston's visits with an anticipation that went beyond gratitude. She loved the way he told stories, using his hands to gesture, his eyes lighting up with humor or softening with emotion. She loved how he listened to her opinions about worker safety and business ethics, without dismissing them as naive or inappropriate for a woman. He treated her as an equal, someone whose mind he respected as much as her person. They discovered shared interests. Both loved reading, though Preston admitted he had little access to books in his current life. Victoria promised to loan him anything from her father's extensive library when they returned to Flagstaff. They both appreciated the stark beauty of the Arizona landscape, the way the light changed throughout the day, painting the rocks and sky in ever-shifting colors. They both believed in fairness and justice, though they had come to those beliefs through different paths. A week into her recovery, Doc Henley finally allowed Victoria to sit in a chair by the window, and Preston arrived to find her already dressed in a borrowed dress, one of Doc Henley's daughter's cast-offs that actually fit reasonably well. Victoria had braided her long dark hair and pinched her cheeks for color, and she saw Preston's eyes widen with appreciation when he saw her. "You look wonderful," he said, then seemed embarrassed by his own enthusiasm. "I mean, You look like you are feeling better. Much better, Victoria confirmed, patting the chair beside her. Sit with me. Tell me what you have been doing when you are not keeping me company. Preston settled into the chair, their shoulders nearly touching. Helping out at the stable, mostly, earning my keep. Met your horse, by the way. She's a sweet mare, just skittish. Cannot blame her for spooking at that rattler. I do not blame her either, Victoria said. I'm just grateful you found me when you did. Preston, I have been thinking. My father's job offer, are you going to take it? Preston was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. I have been thinking about it too. It would mean settling down, giving up the wandering life. That's a big change. Would it be so terrible? Victoria asked softly. To have a permanent home? Steady work? He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart skip. Depends on what else comes with it. Victoria, I need to be honest with you about something. What is it? These past days, spending time with you, getting to know you, it has made me realize something. I've been drifting for 2 years, telling myself I was looking for the right place to settle. But places are not what makes a home. People are. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. I know this might be too soon, and maybe it is just the circumstances throwing us together, but I feel something when I am with you. Something I have never felt before. Victoria's breath caught. I feel it too, she whispered. I thought perhaps it was just gratitude, but it is more than that. Preston, you make me feel seen in a way I have never experienced. You listen to me. Truly, listen. You do not dismiss my ideas or treat me like a delicate flower that needs protection from the harsh realities of the world. You are strong, Preston said. Stronger than most people I have met. But that does not mean you have to face everything alone. Victoria, I know we have only known each other for a week, and I know your father would probably want me to court you properly for months before saying anything like this. But I cannot help myself. I am falling in love with you. Tears sprang to Victoria's eyes, but they were tears of joy. I'm falling in love with you too. It feels impossibly fast, but it also feels right. Like everything that happened, the fall, the pain, all of it, was leading me to you. Preston lifted her hand and kissed it gently. Then I suppose I should take your father's job offer, because I want to be wherever you are, Victoria Brennan. They sat together in the golden afternoon light, hands clasped, both of them grinning like fools, talking about possibilities and futures and all the things they wanted to build together. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both of them were ready to embrace. 2 weeks after her accident, Doc Henley finally cleared Victoria for travel. Preston rented a comfortable wagon and helped her into it, making sure she had plenty of cushions to keep her injured leg comfortable. The journey to Flagstaff would take most of a day, and Preston had packed food, water, and blankets, prepared for anything. As they rolled out of Williams, Victoria looked back at the small town that had become so significant in her life. I will always be grateful to this place, she said. Me too, Preston agreed, snapping the reins gently to keep the horses moving at a steady pace. It gave me you. The journey passed pleasantly. They talked and laughed, and Preston pointed out landmarks and told stories about his wandering days. Victoria shared more about her work with the mining company, her hopes for reform, her worries that the other owners and managers would never take her seriously. They will, Preston assured her. You have good ideas and the determination to see them through. That combination is powerful, and now you will have me helping you. I might not know much about mining, but I know about keeping men safe, and I know how to deal with troublemakers. Are you saying you are going to be my enforcer? Victoria teased. If that is what it takes, Preston was grinning, though I think your sharp mind is probably more intimidating than anything I could do. They reached Flagstaff as the sun was setting, the sky ablaze with color. Thomas Brennan's house was a large, comfortable structure on the edge of town, and he came out to greet them as soon as the wagon pulled up. Victoria, Preston! Thomas helped his daughter down carefully, examining her face. You look well, sweetheart. I am, Father. Preston has taken excellent care of me. Thomas shook Preston's hand warmly. Come inside, both of you. Dinner is waiting and we have much to discuss. Over the meal, Thomas listened as Preston formally accepted the job offer. "I am honored, sir. I promise you will not regret this." "I know I will not," Thomas said. "Victoria has been telling me in her letters about your character and your capabilities. You will start as head of security and safety at our main operation. It is a big responsibility, Preston. You will be overseeing the safety protocols, managing the security team, and ensuring that our workers are protected. Victoria has been pushing for improvements, and she will be working with you closely to implement them." "I welcome the challenge," Preston said, "and I welcome working with Victoria." Thomas looked between them, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "I see. Well, that's a conversation for another time. For now, let us focus on getting you both settled. Preston, I have had a room prepared for you here in the house for tonight. Tomorrow, we can arrange more permanent lodging near the mine." Over the following weeks, Preston threw himself into his new role with the same dedication he brought to everything. He spent long hours at the mine, assessing risks, implementing new safety measures, and earning the respect of the workers with his fair treatment and obvious competence. Victoria worked alongside him when her leg allowed, which grew easier as she healed. They fell into a partnership that was both professional and personal. At the mine, they were all business, focused on improving conditions and increasing efficiency. But in the evenings, when they would often dine with Thomas or take walks around Flagstaff as Victoria's leg grew stronger, they were simply a man and woman falling deeper in love. Preston courted Victoria properly, with Thomas's blessing. He brought her flowers, took her to church socials, and sat with her on the porch swing in the evenings, talking about their days and their dreams. He was patient with her recovery, never pushing her to move faster than she was able, and he was endlessly supportive of her work with the mining company. 3 months after Victoria's accident, on a crisp December evening, Preston asked Thomas for permission to marry his daughter. Thomas gave his blessing immediately, with tears in his eyes. "You are exactly the kind of man I hoped Victoria would find," Thomas told Preston. "Someone who sees her strength, who supports her ambitions, who loves her for who she truly is. You have my blessing and my gratitude." Preston proposed that evening on the porch, with snow beginning to fall softly around them. He had carved a ring from a piece of oak himself, inlaid with a small turquoise stone from the Arizona desert. "I know it is not fancy," he said, kneeling before Victoria, "but I made it with my own hands, and I am hoping you will wear it as a symbol of my promise to spend my life loving you, supporting you, and building a future with you. Victoria Brennan, will you marry me?" "Yes," Victoria breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in February of 1884, in a small church in Flagstaff with close friends and family in attendance. Victoria wore a dress of ivory silk, and Preston wore a new suit that made him look both uncomfortable and devastatingly handsome. Thomas walked Victoria down the aisle, and she saw him wipe away tears as he placed her hand in Preston's. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When Preston said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you as an equal partner in all things. I promise to listen to your ideas, support your dreams, and build a life with you based on mutual respect and affection. I promise to make you laugh, to hold you when you cry, and to never take for granted the gift of your love." Victoria's vows were equally sincere. "I promise to love you with all my heart, to respect your strength, and to build a future with you based on trust and partnership. I promise to adventure with you, to challenge you, and to stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to make our house a home, our love a foundation, and our life together an example of what marriage can be when two people truly see each other." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed Victoria with a tenderness that made her heart swell. The small congregation erupted in applause, and as they walked back down the aisle together, Victoria felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be with this man, building this life. Thomas hosted a reception at his house, and Victoria danced with her new husband under lanterns strung in the yard, despite the winter chill. "I love you, Mrs. Walker," Preston murmured against her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Walker," Victoria replied, laughing with pure joy. "Thank you for finding me in that ravine." "Thank you for throwing that rock so I would know you were there," Preston countered. "Best sound I ever heard." They had planned to move into a small house Thomas owned in town, but Preston surprised Victoria on their wedding night by taking her instead to a newly built cabin just outside Flagstaff, with views of the mountains and enough land to run a few horses. "I bought it with my savings," Preston explained as he carried her over the threshold. "Started building as soon as you said yes. Figured we needed a place of our own, somewhere we could grow." Victoria looked around the cabin, seeing the careful craftsmanship, the large windows to let in light, the fireplace Preston had built with his own hands. "It is perfect," she whispered, "absolutely perfect." Their first year of marriage was busy and fulfilling. Victoria continued her work improving conditions at the mines, now with Preston's full support and enforcement. Together, they implemented safety protocols that reduced accidents significantly. They increased wages and improved living conditions for the workers. Some of the other mine owners grumbled about setting dangerous precedents, but Thomas and Victoria held firm, and Preston's presence made sure no one challenged their authority too aggressively. The workers respected them both, seeing that Victoria and Preston genuinely cared about their well-being. Productivity actually increased with the improved conditions, proving Victoria's theory that treating workers fairly was good for business, not just morally right. At home, Victoria and Preston built a life based on mutual respect and deep affection. They were partners in every sense, discussing decisions together, supporting each other's work, and finding joy in simple pleasures like cooking together, reading by the fire, or riding out to explore the desert landscapes they both loved. In the summer of 1885, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Preston one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Preston's face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, fear, and finally pure joy. "A baby? We are going to be parents?" "We are," Victoria confirmed, laughing at his expression. "Are you ready for this?" "I do not know," Preston admitted, then pulled her close. "But I will figure it out with you, just like we have figured out everything else together. I love you so much, Victoria." "I love you too." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Victoria continued working almost until the end, much to Doc Henley's exasperation when he came to Flagstaff to check on her. "You are as stubborn as ever," he told her with affection. "But your baby is healthy, and so are you. Just promise me you will actually rest when the time comes." Their son was born in March of 1886, a healthy baby with Preston's blue-gray eyes and Victoria's dark hair. They named him Thomas Preston Walker, after both his grandfather and his father. Holding his son for the first time, Preston wept openly with joy and wonder. "He is perfect," Preston whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Victoria, look what we made." "He's going to have your strength and my stubbornness," Victoria said with a tired but radiant smile. "The world better watch out." Thomas the elder was a devoted grandfather, visiting often and spoiling his namesake shamelessly. Preston proved to be a natural father, patient and tender with the baby, waking for night feedings and diaper changes without complaint. He would walk the floor with Thomas when the baby was fussy, singing old cavalry songs in a surprisingly good voice. When Thomas was 6 months old, Victoria returned to work part-time, though she found her priorities shifting. She still cared deeply about the mining company and worker welfare, but her son had become the center of her world in a way she had not expected. Preston supported whatever she wanted to do, caring for Thomas when Victoria was at the mine and never making her feel guilty for pursuing her work. Their second child, a daughter they named Charlotte Marie, was born in the fall of 1888. She had Preston's temperament, calm and observant, and Victoria's determined chin. With 2 children, their cabin felt full of life and love, though also noise and chaos. Preston expanded the cabin, adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. The years passed in a blur of happiness, punctuated by the normal challenges of life. They had lean years when the mining industry struggled, but they weathered them together. They had disagreements and arguments, as any couple does, but they had learned to talk through their problems rather than let resentments fester. They faced illnesses, accidents, and setbacks, but they faced them as a team. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Charlotte was adventurous and fearless, always climbing things and exploring, giving her parents heart attacks on a regular basis. In 1891, they welcomed another son, Samuel James, who had a gift for music and could sing before he could properly talk. Through it all, Victoria and Preston's love deepened and matured. The passionate romance of their early days evolved into something richer and more complex, a partnership built on years of shared experiences, mutual support, and genuine friendship. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when they could, going on rides together through the desert, dancing in the kitchen when the children were asleep. On quiet evenings, they would sometimes talk about that day in the ravine, about how close Victoria had come to dying alone, about the miracle of Preston hearing her rock strike the boulder. "I think about it sometimes," Victoria admitted one night as they lay in bed, Preston's arm around her. "What my life would have been if you had not found me, or if you had just ridden on, figuring it was just a rock fall. I cannot imagine a world where I did not find you," Preston said, kissing her forehead. "You are everything to me, Victoria. You and our children, this life we built, it is more than I ever dreamed possible when I was drifting from place to place." "You gave me so much more than rescue that day," Victoria said softly. "You gave me partnership, respect, love. You saw me as a whole person, not just a woman to be protected or dismissed. That has meant everything." In 1895, Thomas Brennan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 67. Victoria grieved deeply for the father who had supported her dreams and seen her potential when so many others had not. But she took comfort in knowing that he had lived to see her happy, settled with a good man and beautiful grandchildren. His last words to her had been, "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. You proved everyone wrong. You changed things for the better." Victoria inherited control of the mining company, and with Preston's continued support, she expanded their progressive policies across all their operations. They became known throughout the Arizona territory as fair employers, and their mines attracted the best workers because of their reputation for safety and good wages. Other companies began to slowly follow their example, realizing that Victoria's methods actually improved profits rather than hurting them. Their children grew up in a home filled with love, books, music, and the constant example of parents who treated each other as equals and partners. Thomas Jr. studied engineering and eventually joined the family business, bringing new innovations to mine safety. Charlotte became a teacher, determined to expand educational opportunities for girls. Samuel pursued music, playing piano at church and local gatherings. As the new century approached, Preston and Victoria found themselves in their early 40s, still active and engaged with life, but also starting to think about legacy. They had built something substantial together, not just a successful business, but a family and a model for how to treat workers with dignity. On a warm evening in June of 1899, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. Their children were all grown, or nearly so, and the house felt quiet without the constant chaos of young ones. "Have I told you lately that you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen?" Preston asked, taking Victoria's hand. Victoria laughed. "You are biased, but I will take the compliment. Have I told you that you are still the man who makes my heart race?" "Also biased, but appreciated." Preston pulled her close. "Victoria, do you have any regrets about how our life turned out?" Victoria thought about the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I wish my father had lived longer. I wish we had not lost that pregnancy between Charlotte and Samuel. I wish the world would change faster toward justice and equality. But regrets about us, about our choices? No. This life, this partnership, it has been everything I could have hoped for and more. What about you?" "My only regret is that I almost did not take that shortcut to Williams that day," Preston said. "I almost took the main road. If I had, I never would have heard you in that ravine, never would have found you." "But you did," Victoria said, squeezing his hand. "You found me, saved me, and loved me. That is what matters. That is what matters." Preston agreed, kissing her softly. "I love you, Victoria Walker. Then, now, and always." In 1902, Victoria and Preston celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a large party attended by friends, family, workers from the mines, and business associates from throughout Arizona. Thomas Jr., now working as chief engineer at Brennan Mining, gave a speech about his parents. "My parents taught me that love is not just about romance, though they certainly have that," he said with a grin as Victoria and Preston blushed. "Love is about respect, partnership, and building something together that is greater than what either person could do alone. They have done that not just in their marriage, but in their work. They have shown that doing right by people is not just moral, it is smart business. They have proven that a woman can lead a company with wisdom and strength, and that a man can support her without diminishing himself. They have built a legacy of fairness and dignity that will outlast all of us. So please join me in toasting Preston and Victoria Walker, the best parents and the best example anyone could ask for." As everyone raised their glasses, Victoria looked at Preston with tears in her eyes. He squeezed her hand under the table, and she saw the same emotions reflected in his face. They had come so far from that desperate day in the ravine, from the moment when Victoria had thought she would die alone, and Preston had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even known how to pray. Their later years together were marked by a comfortable contentment. They gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations at the mine, trusting Thomas Jr. to carry on their work. They traveled some, visiting Charlotte and Phoenix, where she had opened a school for girls, and attending Samuel's concerts when he performed with orchestras in larger cities. But mostly, they were content to be at home in their cabin outside Flagstaff, the cabin Preston had built for them with his own hands all those years ago. They would ride together through the desert, still marveling at the landscape's harsh beauty. They would read together by the fire on winter evenings. They would sit on the porch and watch the sunsets, Preston's arm around Victoria, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the changes sweeping through Arizona as it approached statehood, about all the things they had witnessed and experienced together. In the spring of 1910, they took a trip back to Williams, retracing the journey from that fateful day in 1883. Victoria rode beside Preston in a comfortable buggy, her riding days limited now by arthritis in the leg she had injured in the fall. They found the ravine where it had all begun and stood looking down at the rocky slope. "I cannot believe you climbed down there," Victoria said, shaking her head. "It looks even more treacherous than I remembered." "I cannot believe you survived falling into it," Preston countered. "You were always tougher than you looked." "We saved each other that day," Victoria said, turning to face him. "You saved my life physically, but I think I saved you too, in a way. You were adrift, looking for purpose. We found it together." Preston cupped her face in his hands, his own face deeply lined now, but his twilight eyes still bright and clear. "I would do it all again, every moment, every challenge, every joy. You are my everything, Victoria. You always have been." They kissed there beside the ravine, two people in their early 60s who had built a life of love, purpose, and meaning together. Around them, the desert bloomed with wildflowers, the same flowers that had lured Victoria onto that dangerous path so many years ago. But she had no regrets, because that path had led her to Preston, to love, to everything that mattered. They returned to Flagstaff and continued their life together, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. They celebrated Arizona achieving statehood in 1912, seeing it as the culmination of the growth and change they had witnessed over their decades in the territory. Preston remained active and healthy well into his 70s, still riding his beloved Duke's descendants and helping with work around their property. Victoria's mind stayed sharp even as her body slowed, and she continued to advise Thomas Jr. on business matters, and wrote letters to politicians advocating for worker protections and women's suffrage. They never stopped loving each other, never took for granted the gift they had been given. Every morning, Preston would kiss Victoria and tell her she was beautiful. Every evening, Victoria would tell Preston she loved him. It became a rhythm, a pattern, as natural as breathing. On a golden afternoon in October 1923, Preston and Victoria sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 80s now, their children grown with children and grandchildren of their own. The cabin had been expanded multiple times to accommodate family gatherings, and it was filled with photos and memories of a life well lived. "Do you remember the first sunset we watched together?" Victoria asked, her hand in Preston's. "In that room at Doc Henley's when I woke up after he stitched my leg?" "I remember," Preston said. "You looked so small and fragile in that bed, but I already knew you were the strongest person I had ever met. I was already half in love with you." "I was scared," Victoria admitted. "Not of dying. I had already faced that. I was scared of what I was feeling for you, how fast and how deeply I was falling. It seemed impossible." "But it was not," Preston said. "It was real, and it was right, and it has been the greatest gift of my life." "Mine too," Victoria agreed. "Preston, promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, I want you to remember that I was happy, deliriously, completely happy with our life together. No regrets, no wishes for anything different. Just gratitude for every single moment." "Victoria, you are not going anywhere," Preston protested, but she shook her head. "We are both old, my love. We have been blessed with more time than most. But whenever it comes, I want you to know that I died happy, knowing I was loved completely and that I loved you with all my heart. Promise me you will remember that." Preston's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "I promise. But the same goes for you. If I go first, you have to promise to remember that you gave my life meaning. You were my home, my purpose, my everything." "I promise," Victoria whispered. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. It was the same sky they had watched together for 40 years, and it was as beautiful as ever. Around them, the sounds of the desert evening began, crickets and the distant call of an owl, the rustling of small animals beginning their nightly activities. Neither of them spoke of it, but both of them felt a sense of completion, of a circle closing. They had lived a full life together, rich with love, purpose, and meaning. They had raised good children who were raising good children of their own. They had changed their corner of the world for the better. They had proven that love, true partnership, and treating people with dignity could create something lasting and worthwhile. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Preston helped Victoria to her feet, and they walked slowly inside their home, arms around each other, supporting each other as they had for 4 decades. Behind them, the desert night settled in, vast and eternal, a silent witness to the love story that had begun in a ravine and grown into something beautiful and enduring. Years later, their great-grandchildren would ask about the couple in the old photographs, the serious man with kind eyes and the elegant woman with the determined chin. And their grandchildren would tell the story of how Preston had found Victoria in a ravine when she thought she was going to die alone, how he had saved her life, and how they had saved each other in all the ways that mattered. They would talk about the partnership Preston and Victoria had built, the changes they had made, the love they had shared. But most of all, they would tell how that moment of crisis, that terrible day when Victoria fell into the ravine, had been the beginning of something wonderful. How sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best things, how love can grow from tragedy and bloom like wildflowers in the desert, beautiful and enduring and strong. Preston and Victoria Walker had built a life together that stood as testament to the power of love, respect, and partnership. From that first moment in the ravine to their final years sitting together on the porch, they had been each other's home, each other's purpose, each other's great love. And that was a legacy worth more than any fortune, more lasting than any monument, more precious than anything else in the world. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that the best love stories are not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but about two people choosing each other every single day, building a life together through challenges and triumphs, supporting each other's dreams and creating something beautiful from shared commitment and deep affection. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, wildflowers still bloom after the rains, just as they did that September day in 1883 when Victoria Brennan set out on a less-traveled trail and found not just beauty, but her destiny. The ravine still stands, a silent reminder of the day a woman thought she would die alone, and a cowboy proved her wrong, saving not just her life, but giving her a love that would last forever.